Welcome to the very first episode of Between the Signals, a podcast brought to you by the UK Dementia Research Institute at King's College London. As our population gets older, dementia has become a major health challenge. If nothing changes, half of us could be affected by dementia in some way, either facing it ourselves, caring for a loved one, or both. June is Global Awareness Month for motor neuron disease, and today we'll be finding out more about this condition from scientists at the UK DRI at King's. Here, scientists are working towards a better understanding of this condition and the development of much-needed, effective treatments. My name is Dr. Asma Bashir, and today, Dr. Sarah Marzi and I will be chatting with expert Dr. Sarah Mizielinska to understand more about motor neuron disease. We hope you enjoyed this episode. This podcast is brought to you by the UK Dementia Research Institute at King's College London. June is Motor Neuron Disease Awareness Month, and we're therefore dedicating this episode to learning more about this condition. My name is Dr. Asma Bashir, and I'm a Public Engagement Manager here at King's College. And I have a background in neuroscience, specifically neurotrauma and neurodegeneration. I would like to introduce you to Dr. Sarah Marzi, who is a group leader at the UK Dementia Research Institute. And on today's podcast, she and I will be speaking with Dr. Sarah Mizielinska, who's also a group leader at the UK DRI, whose research focuses on ALS and FTD. All right, Sarah, I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Marzi, and my research group works on epigenetics in neurodegenerative conditions, trying to understand how environmental risk factors and genetics can influence these conditions.
That's wonderful. And Sarah, please introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sarah Mizielinska, and my research group focuses on how molecules move around the cell and cause neurons to die in ALS and FTD.
Could you tell us a little bit more about motor neuron disease?
Motor neuron disease is a condition that affects neurons in the brain and also in the spinal cord, leading to a condition that affects the muscle movement and also breathing in the person. It's also shortened to MND, and there are very different types of motor neuron disease as well.
Our audiences may have heard of the term ALS as well. Is ALS the same thing as motor neuron disease?
Yeah, ALS is a type of motor neuron disease. ALS stands for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which is a type of motor neuron disease that affects both the upper and lower motor neurons. So it can affect the neurons that come from the spinal cord, controlling the muscles of the body, but also can affect the brain as well.
That's really interesting. Could we talk a little bit about how ALS and motor neuron disease start? Is it genetic? Is it sporadic? How often might it be a genetic case of MND?
Yep, so it can be both genetic or sporadic, which sporadic meaning that it can occur just generally in the population without any particular known genetic cause. About 5 to 10% of ALS is genetic, caused by a variety of different genetic mutations, such as people may have heard of C9orf72, FUS, TDP43. These are all different gene names. And actually the most common of these is the C9orf72 mutation, which accounts for, in familial or genetic cases, up to kind of 50 or 60%, depending on genetic ancestry. But actually, if you look at the whole of ALS in general, it's about 6%, so still pretty high.
Okay. In sporadic cases, have researchers found that there's a particular environmental factor or something that might contribute to the incidence of ALS?
Well, there's lots of different things. As in all conditions, it can be a combination of environment, lifestyle, genes. They can be like grains of sand on a scale. So the more different factors, environmental, lifestyle, genetics you have, they all group together and lead to the condition manifestation in people.
So as someone is developing motor neuron disease, what are some of the first symptoms and how would it be diagnosed?
Yes, so it can start with muscle weaknesses or twitches or loss of muscle mass. These can be very subtle to start with and kind of gradually build up over time. Can also occur with slightly different things like speech and communication difficulties. Actually, some people with ALS develop a type of dementia called frontotemporal dementia. This is a type of dementia that occurs with changes in language or behaviour. So you could start to have some of those symptoms as well. And diagnosis, you mentioned. Diagnosis is difficult, so you really need to go and see a medical doctor. I am not a medical doctor, but it can involve looking at your muscles and testing their function and things like that.
I remember when I heard about the diagnosis of Bruce Willis, and people didn't know how it would affect his life. What are some of the first symptoms that people tend to see when a family member is affected by ALS or more broadly motor neuron disease? What's the first sign that something might be awry?
So ALS is, as I said before, is the kind of when neurons die in both the upper and the lower motor neurons. So it can start with lower symptoms. They would tend to be the muscle problems, so like cramps, twitches, muscle mass issues. Or the upper symptoms would be more like swallowing, breathing, or something like this. So it can start in either of those. Both of those could be considered ALS, or they could be other types of motor neuron disease as well.
And are there any treatments for these diseases?
Yes, so it's pretty limited, unfortunately, at the moment. There's only one drug given within the UK at the moment that really treats the disease. That's called riluzole. And this does slow down the damage to the neurons, particularly the motor neurons that are affected in ALS or motor neuron disease, and reduces their sensitivity to communicate. So stopping them becoming overexcited and therefore reducing the damage that they may receive. Obviously, lots of research is going on. It's actually a really exciting time in M&D and ALS research because actually we're starting to have the turning point where our fundamental understanding is leading to real drug development, things that bringing to the clinic. For example, tofersen is also a drug that is coming to the clinic soon. It is already approved in other countries, but the UK, we're just going through approval now. This is a genetic level treatment that targets SOD1, a particular type of ALS. So it's a really good drug. It's one of the first that actually, apart from riluzole, slows disease more, but it is only for that really small population of people that have that genetic defect. So we need to develop other drugs to kind of target all the other different types and also the ones that have no obvious genetic cause.
Mm-hmm. And is that work that's currently being done at the DRI, drug discovery, exploration? And if not, what is the work that you're doing in your lab to explore this field further?
Yes, the UK Dementia Research Institute is doing lots of work across the ALS and M&D spectrum. In fact, there's 10 to 15 groups that really focus quite heavily on ALS, including my own. In terms of what my group does to contribute to this understanding. So as I said, it kind of has two parts to it. One part is really understanding how molecules move around the cells, and particularly neurons, particularly this molecule called TDP-43. They've mentioned before is genetically linked to TDP, but it also becomes mislocalized, like placed from the wrong place in virtually all forms of ALS as well. And so I really want to understand how that first mislocalization occurs, and also then once it's mislocalized, how it leads neurons to die. So in addition to studying kind of really down to the single molecule, how they move and become mislocalized, also developing new models to actually be able to test our therapeutic approaches and kind of dissect what is the reason, what is the fact of the TDP-43 protein that leads those neurons to die. So those kind of two parts.
And this TDP-43, that's common in all of motor neuron disease?
It's about 97% of all genetic and sporadic cases of ALS present with mislocalization of TDP-43, both in the brain and in the spinal cord. And there's a few exceptional cases, such as SOD1 that I mentioned before.
And so really, if you could solve this TDP-43 mislocalization, do you think you could target a lot of different cases of ALS?
Yeah, of course, that's the aim, which obviously would be amazing, would be a real game changer in the field. And there's so much work to understand the biology behind TDP-43 at the moment. And also the important thing is that it also occurs in other neurodegenerative diseases and dementias as well. So actually, obviously, it has a really key role in ALS, but it may also have roles in other diseases, be one of those contributing grains of sand that we mentioned earlier.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the other research that's being done at the DRI about motor neuron disease?
Yes, of course. The UK DRI really has a wide range of research activities in MND or ALS, really from discovery science all the way through to kind of clinical research, covering genetics, epigenetics by Sarah here, how genes are made into proteins, how molecules are moved around the cell and kind of kept in the right place, how neurons communicate, and the role of other cells in the brain and nervous system. And then also moving those findings into the next stage of developments for people with disease. For example, Professor Chris Shaw here at King's College London and colleagues have created a spin-out company called Aviado Bio, who are developing viral-based gene therapies for both ALS and FTD. And also Professor Savanka Pal and our director, Professor Siddharthan Chandran, co-lead M&D SMART, which is the largest ever nationwide multi-arm, multi-stage platform trial for M&D. Which is pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that sounds fantastic. Like such a broad range of research going on here and at the UK DRI.
You mentioned some really interesting terms when you were talking about the work that's being done. I just want to let our audience know that we will be diving into a lot of these topics in future episodes, so stay tuned.
What if our audience wants to learn more about MND and ALS research?
Well, the best place I could signpost them to is if you search for MND or ALS in the conditions section of the UK DRI website. That's where you can find out more and maybe potentially how to get involved, etc. But of course, if you or anyone you know is worried about any symptoms, the first person you should always go to is your GP.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Mizielinska, and for sharing your work with us here today. To quickly summarize, MND is a neurological condition that is currently being studied and researched extensively at the UK DRI in the hopes of understanding more about this condition and exploring possibilities for treatment and cure. So thank you for your time, and thank you to my co-host, Dr. Marzi. If you liked this episode, be sure to engage with us on YouTube and our social media pages. You'll also be able to learn more about our work by visiting the UK DRI website, ukdri.ac.uk. To summarize our first episode of Between the Signals, motor neuron disease is a genetic and sporadic condition that affects neurons in the brain and spinal cord. There are few and very limited treatments available, but researchers around the world, including right here at the UK Dementia Research Institute at King's, are working to unravel these conditions and hoping to develop treatments. At the UK DRI at King's, research studies of scientists like Dr. Sarah Mizielinska are focused on finding the molecular causes underlying conditions such as MND. We thank you for listening to this episode. For more information, please visit ukdri.ac.uk, and we'll speak to you soon in the next episode of Between the Signals.